Well, hello out there, and particular thank you to my members and subscribers and all that kind of stuff. So I was really looking forward to this car arriving. Thank you to Leah who trucked it my way. Found me on YouTube, and this car had a particularly weird set of faults. It actually had some codes I've never seen on this motor type. So this is a 5AQ. I'd only seen those codes on a 5AM, and the combination was just really weird. She said it had got a bit of sign of sort of, rat or mouse or something inside. Basically, I just went out to it one day and it wouldn't work. It was kind of full of error messages. They had some issues, I think, with 12-volt battery going flat previously, but always managed to, get it going again, charge the battery or swap it or whatever, and the car had started again. So fine, but yeah, they went out one day and it had an error which wouldn't clear. I tried another battery and still wouldn't clear. So, yeah, I thought this would be really interesting. I was thinking there's going to be like a wire that's been chewed through, and then we can, analyse what the symptoms are, what the fault codes are. We can look at the wiring diagram, and we can kind of like, have a dig into, what if you lose comms, you get a weird fault code, but you've got loss of comms with something. We can look at the wiring diagram and, work out where the wires are damaged. And then fix it, and it'd be really interesting. I wanted to do a video for a while about EV diagnostics, and I thought this would be a really interesting video. And I have to say, sorry to Leah, the owner, this car has been a complete disappointment. So what actually happened is it arrived yesterday on a truck, electric motor failure on the dash, 12-volt battery was a bit low, so I do what I normally do, which is I get my big battery support unit, and I put it on charge, and I just leave it. So the 12-volt battery's charging up. So then you've got a nice stable 12-volt supply. You can actually just run the car straight off the battery support unit, but it's easier, and the weather wasn't very good yesterday. So I just put it on charge and leave it, and then have a look at it later, sort of thing, once the 12-volt battery's got some charge in it. So I did that, and then I got my diagnostic scanner, and I put it on there, and there's a bucket load of codes, which basically with Zoe's, there's always loads of codes, okay? If you have an issue charging and the charge point cuts off unexpectedly, or you've got an issue with comms or something, like a dodgy charge cable or whatever, and the car stops charging unexpectedly, it logs codes for that. They just log codes all the time. So basically what you do with a Zoe is just clear out all the codes, and then when the fault, any codes that won't clear, obviously that indicates the fault's still there. Or if like it's a charging fault, like, all the codes clear, then you plug it into charge and it won't charge. Obviously the codes that come back are relevant. They might come back but be inactive, because you're not actively trying to charge or whatever. So you get something, instead of having like 50 codes to go through, you just take a picture of them anyway, so we've got them for reference, but then delete them and see what comes back. And so that's what I did with this car. So I deleted the codes, and what happened was the error message went off the dash. So it had electric motor failure on the dash. That went away. The electric motor failure was consistent with the fault codes it had, I have to say. So that's what was causing that. So it had an active fault code, and it went away, and I thought that's a bit of a surprise, and I sort of paused for a second and I thought it's about to come back, and it didn't come back. So I pressed the start button and it started, and this car's not been driven since about October, so about 4 to 5 months, and and I sort of sat there waiting for it to keel over and have a meltdown, and nothing happened really. So I sort of drove it forwards a bit and backwards a bit, and it's still working. So I drove it down to the end of my lane, because unfortunately I live down the end of a private lane. I don't own it, but somebody does. Farmer owns it. But yeah, it just means I can drive the car a little way and then turn around and come back again without going on the public road, because this hasn't got an MOT. And I came back and it was still running, and I thought, well, that's interesting. So the chatting to the owner, sort of saying this is what's happened, she was quite surprised, about as surprised as me. And she said someone had been out and looked at it and actually couldn't clear the codes, which is interesting. As well as chatting to her a bit more today, she said that the 12-volt battery had been low and had been going flat, things like that, but it was a fairly cheap one. So that's sort of the previous history of it. And we've either got, and I have to say, what I've done now with it is I have left it running. I have left the heater on for a while because it's a bit damp inside, because it's been not been used over the winter, so it's got a little bit damp. I've left it, so I left it running with the heater on, and one of the back windows just cracked down a little bit just to warm it up, just turn it off for the noise, so that the car was nice and warm and drying out and stuff. And it's not dropped out of ready. The error messages have not come back. I've looked at the fault codes. It's got one fault code for tyre under inflation because it's got TPMS and one of the tyres needs pumping up, but that's literally the only fault code. And it's all fine. I plugged it in and charged it a bit because just thinking about if we've got another fault here and it's going to come back, how do we try and make it come back if it's going to? You know, if it's got another fault, how do we try and make sure that we've covered that off? And I'm not going to give it back to him and then it's going to, you know, have the issue, because that'll be really annoying. So the ECU that the error came from, it's the ECU that also controls charging. And so I thought, well, I'll charge it. So I plugged it in for a while on the granny cable and it's been charging. I have to say the range shows really poor because it's literally been sat there for about 4 or 5 hours with the heater on. So it's covered 0 miles, but used many kilowatt hours. Oh, you can see on here actually, I've used 4 kilowatt hours consumption, and my average speed is 0.1 miles, and I've done 0.1 miles per hour, and I've done 0.4 miles, and I'm doing 0.6 miles per kilowatt hour. Oh yeah. So I'm very inefficient. That's what happens if you leave the heater on in your car for 4 or 5 hours and all you do is 2 trips to the end of the lane. Yeah, then it doesn't think you can go very far. That's obviously not very efficient, but yeah, it is fascinating, really. Very disappointing, as I say. I was expecting something really interesting and we can talk about diagnostics, but we can't. But yeah, there's 2 possibilities with this car. One is that it has got a fault, and at some point it's going to have a meltdown, and that fault is going to come back. Okay, so there is a fault here. We've cleared a symptom, but we haven't solved the original fault. And yeah, at some point it's going to happen again. Or the other possibility is that it was a poor 12-volt battery and the battery kept going flat and the car's just got its knickers in a raw twist, basically. And the battery it's got on it's now is a new one, so that's fine, so we don't have to worry about that. And I've charged it up, and then as the car's been, you know, running and charging and stuff, it's topping it up, so that's fine. And yeah, what do we think? From what I've seen, I think it was just a poor 12-volt battery and the car's had a complete meltdown. The error codes needed clearing. It's interesting that someone else looked at it and couldn't clear the codes, and they had a proper diagnostic machine, just like mine. I don't know how experienced they were. They may not have realised that you've got to put the key card in the slot to clear the codes, and whether they did that. The other thing is, if the 12-volt battery's in a poor condition, you're not going to be able to do it either. So that's some possibilities, and that's kind of just why I do things the way I do, because I work on Zoes all the time and you just get to know them a bit. But a little bit disappointing there. But yeah, potentially they came out and they didn't, obviously they weren't in their workshop, have, you know, charging facilities or whatever. Even the booster packs, you get the little like lithium booster packs, the voltage is quite low on those, so potentially not suitable, especially if the car's woken up with a poor 12-volt battery. You would need to kind of put the car to sleep, get a decent 12-volt supply, and then wake it all up again, kind of thing. But yeah, interesting. Really not what I hoped though. Yeah, quite boring really. I was hoping for, you know, an interesting job. But yeah, I kind of fixed it by accident really. So we will see what happens. It's got an MOT, so I've booked an MOT. My local place was quite busy, so that's not till Wednesday next week. But that's not bad really, because we can check this starts, check it charges, put the heater on a bit more, and just generally, you know, make sure it's okay. It's got an under tray off and stuff that I need to put back on, but yeah, an interesting one. Not really what I was hoping, to be honest. I was hoping for a really interesting case, and I do get, you know, occasionally a bit bored of just doing motor bearings. So yeah, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be interesting, you know. Yeah, totally different video for you guys to watch, and yeah, looking at wiring and architecture and all that kind of stuff, and really meaty, proper diagnosis, proper diagnostics. But sorry, that's not going to be this car. You're going to have to wait for another car. Yeah, if you've got a Zoe that's got a weird fault, let me know, because I would like to see it. Yeah, we've kind of seen lots of things several times, and I'd really like to see something different, to be honest, rather than just motor bearings. Yeah, so this was interesting though. I think it's probably a telltale that it had a few weird faults. and they weren't clearing. So normally where you have a fault, the car, obviously certain things happen and the car logs that fault, and if those things clear, then that fault becomes inactive. It's just within the memory, so it takes that fault out of active. And if the car's logged a code it shouldn't have, so as in it's logged a code just because it's had a bit of a meltdown, really poor 12-volt battery supply, that kind of thing, it's then not a surprise. It's not going to actively clear that code because it's been logged from it just having a complete meltdown, basically, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's not logged it under the normal, in a normal way, therefore it's not going to clear it in a normal way. Is a distinct possibility. So yeah, very interesting. We'll see in a couple of days. I was chatting to the owner about whether to do a drain test, because it's possible that something's draining the 12-volt battery, and then that's what's causing these issues, because they did have it going flat a few times, although they did also say it was kind of a cheap 12-volt battery, so it could have just been a really naff battery and it's gone flat repeatedly, and that's what's caused this problem. But what I don't think it's worth doing a long drain test, because I haven't seen any symptoms. But what I might do is just a basic drain test on the whole car, because that won't take many minutes and just give us it's not as accurate, but if it's got a big drain you can spot it basically, and not too invasive. I can just clamp some wires and just do a couple of meter tests and then go from there. But I think it's going to be fine. I think it's going to be absolutely fine. I think it's just really unlucky. The battery went flat several times. It's logged some codes it really shouldn't have, because it's just had a meltdown with being flat. And I think it's even more unfortunate that probably the 12-volt battery was so flat when the guy, whoever it was, came and looked at it, that he couldn't clear the codes, or he wasn't aware about putting the key in the slot possibly. But yeah, interesting. Not what I hoped for, but yeah, one day we will get a really interesting job and we'll do some proper diagnostics, and yeah, we'll have something we can really work through a chunky fault, and we can end up looking at technical information and stuff like that to work it out. But it's not going to be today, I'm afraid, but good for the owner, I suppose, if this keeps working. So yeah, anyway, hope that's interesting, and I will catch you later. Cheers.